Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Low Code Cafe, episode number 104 for Wednesday, August 10th of 2022. Today, we have an interesting topic where we'll be talking more about Python, expanding on what Radu did last week to build, test, and implement scripts. So that will be a story we'll get into in a few minutes. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Dale Warner. I'm head of support for Plantin App. This event, Low Code Cafe, is one we do every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time. And so this is a webinar we do for the community. We talk about our product, the upcoming releases and enhancements. But the lion's share of the presentation is usually devoted to working with the product in a technical way. If you are interested in participating and one moment here, we'll promote Radu. If you have an interesting use case and you'd like to present it, we would be happy to have you be our guest. Just reach out to us, we'll make that happen. All these past episodes are recorded and out on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/plantinapp, or you can use the QR code there on the screen. It is also in the links that we'll post here in a few minutes to the chat. But all these episodes are recorded. We put nice markers in the recording so you can jump right to the part that you want to watch. Today, I'm doing the introduction. We'll also cover the From the Trenches segment, stories from the trenches of support. And then the lion's share will be dedicated to Radu's product, what he's prepared for us with Python. You can engage with us on the chat window or Q&A. You can raise your hand if you want to ask a question. And of course, there's the feedback form that'll be in the links as well. So today, From the Trenches, we have previously released 28 hotfixes to version 1.21. A lot of those were for an obscure security setting. So that was recommended but non-critical. This week we're releasing 3 more. We have 2 bug fixes and some enhancements. And today, for my segment, I'm going to talk a lot about these enhancements because I think they're for some of you, they'll be very useful. So from a bug standpoint, we had a bug where if you were deleting a token and then trying to edit one immediately thereafter, that it wouldn't allow you to do that. And so now that's fixed in this with this hotfix. And then we had an odd bug having to do with date time zones, where if you were updating a record that was a date and time field through action form, through the form builder, that the date could change as you were saving it. So each successive edit would cause it a change due to time zone difference. And so we've isolated and resolved that one. From our enhancements, they really fall into 3 distinct categories. That we have a save file to disk action that we've added some request headers. And I'm going to show you that. We later found an issue with that where there were some errors, and so now we're removing the errors for that same save file to disk. For file management, we added an output file ID for pack folder, so we'll touch on that one here in a minute. And then I'm going to go in a little bit in depth into listings because we've added a detail view setting that I think many of you will find useful. So let's take a look at those things. In the first one, I find it's often easier to show actions, easy to show actions, at least what they look like in workflows. So we'll bring up workflows and just create a new one. And so for the pack item, I don't know if you're aware, in our file management section, we have a pack folder. So if you wanted to create a zip or some other format of a folder that's compressed, you can use the pack folder action, and it asks parameters like the directory that you're going to archive, where you want it to be stored, the archive name. You can use zip or any of these other formats to choose what kind of a packing or compression that you want to take place, to what the result's going to be. But we've added this output token name. File output token has whatever the token is. You can get to things like the file name on the server, relative URL, absolute URL, the file size, the MIME type. So there's a variety of outputs that were not available to you before, and so now you can explicitly grab all of these. So that's pack folder. The save file to disk was another one. And so if you use the save file to disk, also in file management, this always had the ability to grab a file from a URL. So you could point, for example, to a PDF file on some other server. You just give it the URL name where you wanted to go get that file, and it would store it on your local system in and give you access to it according to these tokens. The change is that sometimes websites have security, and so now we have added this ability to add headers. And so when it does the GET request to get the file, you can add headers. So for example, if you need to do some kind of authentication and you've already taken care of the authentication, you can pass that through these headers to get the file. So before, presumed that you're getting a file that was unsecured. Now you can pass what's necessary to get the secured information. So that's useful. And again, depending on where you've been in the product, you might not have known that we can pack a folder or retrieve a file from a remote server explicitly in that fashion. So those two actions are very handy. The one that I'm going to spend a little bit of time showing is this listing builder, because we've added a detail view setting, and that becomes available in this version 5.21.15. So I've just to demonstrate this, I have an empty page that I've created for today, Low Code Cafe 104, and I'm going to go into edit mode and place a listing on the page and show you this. So we place a listing or an action grid onto the page. This is also, it's the same listing module, obviously, that we use for the screens that are generated within Plantain app itself. So these settings that you're going to see, you'll have access to as well. So first, I'm going to set it up just to show a list of users. So I am going to do this by way of a SQL select. But you can use any data source that you want with this feature. And when you do a SQL select, you need to provide the ID column. So done both. That's kind of the minimum here. And so having saved the data source, I can add fields, and I'm going to add user ID, first name, last name, and is super user as my fields. So I add that, and we get them here, and so we'll save that and take a look, just kind of see where we are. So we have user ID, first name, last name is super user. So I'm going to add a feature that you can click in. This is what we call our detail view. So we'll bring this up again. Like to give things name. We'll call this users with details. And if we go to our buttons and add an item button, I'm going to do this as add a special button, inline details. This is kind of a shortcut. You can do this manually as well. But by adding inline details, it creates a button called details that's going to be on each item. And it's automatically added the custom detail view. So the custom detail view, you get to specify what you want it to show. In our case, I don't want to do the custom detail view. I want to use the detail view action. And so I'm going to delete this one out So instead of using custom detail view within the detail view, it's going to show on the right sidebar. But this, the purpose of this is to show all the fields that are available on the detail view. And so we can click on this and show you how this works. So we now get a detail button, and we click on one of these and we get a detail view. So it's a way to provide additional information. You can kind of drill down. And so now we get to the area where we've changed and added functionality. For each item, you can specify whether or not it's visible on the detail view. We used to have a different feature visible only on the detail view, but we've changed the logic a little bit. So you can choose it just like you can choose whether it's available on mobile or tablet, desktop, or large screen. So for example, we can make this is super user not visible within the normal listing, but is visible within the detail view. So by doing this, it's going to be removed as a column on your listing, but when you click in on detail, you'll still see it here. And then in kind of expanding on that a little bit, we might say that the user ID, since it's on the listing, we don't need it on the detail view. Same with first name and last name. So the detail view, this gives you control. It can you can get it to appear on the listing itself or in the detail view or both. And I know some of you on the call have asked for this feature. So now when we look at the detail view, it only shows the field that we've selected for is in the detail view. So just a new area of control, and you'll be able then to select whether you want it on one or both or neither. Okay, with that, I am going to move on. Those are our new features, and those are all available by the hotfixes on the configuration updates tab. I will remind you that we run another meeting on Fridays during the same hour. It's called the Low Code Campfire, and I encourage you to come and join us on that. That's run in a meeting format, so everyone can participate, and we often see lots of questions and issues solved during that meeting, and we gather some great ideas, and so it's a great way to engage with us. I'm going to put some links on the clipboard here on the chat. Let's see. Yep. So you can register in advance for that meeting I just mentioned. You can look at our recordings on Plantanet on the YouTube channel, and you can access the community portal. That's where you get a lot of great information and help from your fellow Plantanet users. And there's also an opportunity on that screen to sign up for live help. We run 2 or 3 live help sessions every week, and we already have some of our people taking advantage of that. We just want to make sure that you know that's a resource available to you, the live help on the top menu of community.plantanet.com. And as always, we solicit your feedback if you have anything for us from this meeting, ways that we can make it better. With that, I ask Radu to jump in, and we can show you what he's got with build, test, and implement scripts in Python.
Cool. All right. So Dale, I will. All right. So the screen share is all mine, from what I understand. All right. So let's continue on the same topic from last time. If you didn't say, did I share the right screen?
Yes, this is the get started.
Yeah, the get started. Perfect. All right. So last time we showed you how to add, basically how to run Python scripts, but there was a lot of settings that then deploying on the files directly that needed to happen on the file server. The Python setup, sadly, there's nothing else that, at least for the moment, that we can do, that you can do. You still need to install it and everything, as showed in the last episode. But what we are planning to do today is basically create a way to manage those scripts that we are planning to basically have a list of scripts available for us and start running those directly and managing the Python code directly through a web interface. And Dale, I was thinking if we do that, why not also add some JavaScript flavor into it? It's basically maintaining sources of code, so that can actually help us. That can actually help us a little bit expand on the subject.
Perfect.
Right. So first of all, I'm just going to start easy. So first of all, we need to create an entity for us to start storing this kind of information that we need for the files that we're planning to manage directly from the file manager. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and create a new entity. Let's call it code and codes. You can choose whatever you want in this particular step. And for the properties, most likely we are going to need a name and a file. And that file is going to be of a type of a document. And also maybe add some description. And we can start with this for the moment. And if we need something else during the process, we'll figure it out and make that work. Now, let's save this entity because we are not yet done to it. Because I was talking about executing also JavaScript and Python, it makes sense to also create an entity for the code type so we can classify those. Like this, code types. And this can only have like a name attached to it and the name, and click save. And go back to the code. And let's say type, and attach an entry from the entity of code type. Also, just to make everything a little bit nicer in the menu, I think we can go and say that the code type should live under the page should live under the page of code like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And click save. All right, let's preview a little bit the application. So now we have codes and also code types available. The first things first, let's define what code types we need. And who knows, maybe we can add others. But for the moment, let's go with Python. And I think I need also to bring something else into this entity, the extension that we want to use in JavaScript. All right. So maybe also a column for the extension, because we may use this type to also, when we write the files directly on the disk and update the files on the disk, we may need to do this kind of modification. So what we can quickly do, go to the code types and also add a property called extensions. Okay, extension, we could have one. Well, and it can be text, and it should be. We need to leave it empty for the moment. And in the code types, most likely we need to add the extension as well. For Python, it's Py, and for JavaScript is JS. All right. Going back to the codes. Let's first of all, the idea is that whenever we create a new I think I did a small mistake here. Whenever we add a new code, we also need to write a file on the disk. And we can use what Dale showed you earlier, save file to disk, but we are not going to use the URL input mode. We are going to use the text mode, and we are going to specify the extension. Before we get there, I saw a small mistake that I did regarding the code. I made the code a property of type text, and I want it to be a large text for the moment because we want to input a lot of code. And sadly, the text property is limited to only 350 characters length. Yeah, sorry, I was just
Yep.
Where is large?
Three things at once. It's hard.
Yeah. So, all right. So regarding to code, before we start saving files, I just want, first of all, I want to arrange a little bit this form because you are not going to write this code in just such a small place. And also, the thing is that we are not going to use the file. We are not going to upload the file each time that we are interested in uploading. We are going to manage the code of the file directly here. So there are two things. First of all, we need to figure out how to save the file on the disk. And when we are editing, we need to also read it and save it back on the disk. And we're going to get on the execution part in a few. Now, the thing is something, the thing will be something like this. First of all, we need to go into the form. And first of all, I personally like the labels to be aligned at top. It gives you a little bit more space to work with. And also, so this will be like the first change that we want to do. The second one is that we do not need the file upload, so we are going to delete the file upload. And maybe it makes sense a little bit to have the type at the top and the code at the bottom. Let's go with this. So let's edit a little bit this form, and let's have a look of how it looks. All right, so it's getting better, but I think we can improve a little bit more on the view of this. So let's go with making the pop-up itself a little bit wider. So let's set the display name in pop-up, and let's go and say I want this to be 80% of the screen, so we have a lot of space to see our code. All right, and maybe go also to the code section for the large text and say we want more than 3 rows. We want, let's say we want 10 rows. So we make that a little bit bigger inside. Okay, and let's have a quick look how it looks right now. All right, so this is more likely, and maybe just one more finishing touch. I don't think we need the name to be that big and the type to be that big. I think we can put them on the same line. All right, let's have a look. Perfect. Okay. Now there is a security consideration to take in account at this point. By default, the application only has a few permitted extensions that you can basically save files or upload files with. Just because we are going to go and do the .py and .js files that we are planning to save on the disk, the idea with the best idea it will be at this point to I'm sorry, the best idea it will be to go under servers. Sorry, under security, my bad. More security settings, and then we have the allow the file extension and end user extension whitelist. What we want to do here is add the JS and the .py here, and also the .js and .py. Oops, sorry, comma, not that. And comma this JS and py. Okay, let's save this, and this is not going to bother us with saying that we cannot save the particular files on the disk. Now let's go to the code form, and let's hand tackle right now the adding of the code. So for adding of the code, let's navigate to the add button and see what it does until now. So it's going to create a new entry, a new entry in the code entity, but it also looks for a file. Now, because we want to create the file, we also want to create a file on the disk for this to run. What we can actually do is just take the code itself and save a file on the disk with the particular code. While the code itself doesn't need to stay in the entity itself, it's just for an example purposes. So basically, you can add any large text and use that, and only save the files directly on the disk. But just for the exemplification, we're going to keep this in the entity as well. Now we are looking. Yeah, please, Dale.
Yeah, so the file needs to be on the disk because eventually we're going to run it, and it needs to be there to run.
Yeah, there's this thing that there's a different thing for Python. We need it to be on the disk so we can run it with PowerShell. For JavaScript, not that much, but let's do the same implementation for both of them.
Right.
Save file to disk. Before creating the code, input mode is going to be text content. The content is going to be text. The folder, for the moment, let's save everything in the Python folder that we already have from the other video. And for the name, we can either we can use the name that we are choosing here. So it's gonna be p_name, pick like this, p_name. But we also, what we need the extension of it. So before adding, like we have the dot, we need here the extension. The extension we need to get from the type. So to do that, we'll need to do a proper, first of all, we need to do a read code type. The code type that we are reading needs to be based on the type. So the type itself is going to be this one. So we can copy the field ID, which is going to be our_type ID. Like this. We can get the output of the type in a variable type, and then we can go to the save file to disk and say that we want this to be type extension. And I need to,
Nope.
Yeah.
Good.
Spaghetti finger, sorry. Because the same files should be the same. Basically, whenever we update the code, we don't want to have like we don't need to have a rename. We don't need to add versions of the code. We will need to choose overwrite. And in the end, we need to get the file ID of the newly added document. So we can take this variable and output in the file ID and go with this to be saved as a link to the file. So let's click save. Give it a moment. All right. And let's see how we did. So let's click on new. Let's go with test. Let's choose Python, for example. And let's say, for example, print 1 + 1. Let's go with this. And let's click add. Right, so we have test.py, which is our file. And if I click on it, I can actually, and most likely I cannot download it because I need, maybe let's have a quick look to see. We can have a quick look in the, so we have this file here, the Python file. Most likely there are some permissions that we need to be granted, and let's have a quick look. So why is this not available for us? This looks fine. This looks fine, but
if you do it right there in the browser, do the down,
yeah, it wants. So why wouldn't it let us do this directly from the entity? Let's have a quick look to see if we can figure it out really quickly. So it's most likely portals, or doesn't it like that it's not? Yes. No, still same probability 0.10. Why wouldn't you let me do this? Let's see if we can make this work for the moment. Let's see. So how is the file? Basically, okay. So it's a portal link, but it's a file portal link. There's no display text. And all right. What I'm proposing, Bill, maybe we can figure out this at the end of the video. We have time. It's not that important to download the file, which is it's more of a different way of what we want to do. Now we have the test. We have the Python file. We know the type. We know the code that's inside. Most likely what we need to do is, well, right now, the thing is that the code that we have here is saved, so we can change this for the editing part. So we can update this, and now we updated the Python code that we have. And if we download this, let's go to the file management for the moment. And if I open this kind of extension, or maybe I need to show it in folder first. Where is it? Open to it. All right, we have the Python, and if I open it with a text editor like Visual Studio Code, let's say, Now oops, I forgot to, did I forgot to save when I did this? Or
you did an edit and we haven't done edit yet. You did it on add.
I did it on add. Oh, I didn't do the edit. You are right. You're completely right. So let's do the edit part as well.
And that's good. We have it on recording now. Radu says I'm completely right.
You're right. Sorry. So we kind of need to do the same thing here. We need to read the document type. We need to do we need to also read the type again, like we did last time. Put this in a variable called type. So now that we have the extension, we need to also do the save file to disk and put it here. Also, input mode should be text. Everything should be p_code. Folder should be the same one. The pattern should be the same, like p_name. Everything should be set to overwrite again.
Extension in the pattern.
Yeah. The extension. I forgot the extension, and you are right. So it should be type extension. And I didn't. Maybe third try the term. We'll see. So we get the file ID again, and then we click on update code, and we remove the file ID that we didn't want to use, like a file upload that we wanted to generate our own code. And let's click save. And let's click some refresh here. So why did the file? We can figure it out in a second. So we do this, we click update, and we get the file again. It will work now. We still not. Anyway. I think what I can do really quickly, I think I can go to tokens. I know there is this core token, which is called file. And I think this one can give us another link, and hopefully that should work. So I can go into my listing format and go to the files section and remove the port and link file and go to a text one. And let's go with a little bit in HTML mode, and let's go with a right, and the relative URL file should get here. Basically, at this point, we're getting a relative URL to the file, the existing file, and we can go with also the. We can go with what? We can go with the. I think this one should also bring the
download or something.
Yeah, download. And I was just thinking if I keep the full name of the full name, but I think we can actually do this. We have all the components that we need, so we can go with like name dot, and we should have a column available for us, which should be tab extension, which we have here. So we don't need to add a column, but it's available when rendering the form. So then we can go something like this. And what? Okay. Let me do this. Let me do this again. I think I miswritten something. So it should be an a. Oh, I know what the problem is. A ref, and close this this link. Let's grab again the token. And it doesn't like when you're composing a link, it doesn't like to have double quotes when passing the parameter. So you should change to single quotes. The editor doesn't like it, so it tries to sanitize the the content, so it doesn't know what to do with double quotes in a ref parameter. And then we can go with, I think, type extension. Did I do it? Ah, not today. Okay, let's copy this so we don't lose it again. But now it should be fine. No, it should be fine.
Nice.
Let's click save and refresh the view a little bit. And now if I click on it, I'm not really sure why it doesn't like this. Not really sure. It may be something that's not related to me. There may be some extensions that are not allowed on the server itself that we have. So the link, it gets blocked a little bit earlier than we do. Let's do something similar, and let's create a test also for JavaScript. We can have this, and this one should basically say return 1 + 1 or 1 + 2. We keep the same idea. So basically, this is the idea. The button needs to have the print because we are going to grab the response through a execute PowerShell action, while the JavaScript can also give the return directly, and we are going to use a run JavaScript action to grab the output of this particular code. All right, so now we have the files, we have the content, we can update the content, the files get updated on this file, and everything looks good for the moment. Now, what we need to do is basically go to the workflows and start executing those kind of code. So to do that, what we can do is basically create a new workflow, and let's go first. I think the easiest one, it will be the JavaScript version, but we'll also get to the Python one. So that's going to be basically what we need to do is figure out the input parameter, which is going to be of type code, and this is going to be of an entry of type of entry code. And in the process, basically what we can do is say execute JavaScript on the server side, and we'll get in a second of configuring this, and then close the workflow. So that's going to be everything that we need. And now in configuration of that, the code basically is going to be the code entry and the code property code, and the output is going to be like the return, like this. And then we just get the return out as an output parameter, right? So we get this.
So here in JavaScript, we're actually running the code that's stored in the entity. We're bringing it in, running it, not the file.
Not the file itself. We can run the file if we want.
That's fine. I'm just pointing out we're doing it out of the entity. It should all be the same.
Yeah, if we are planning to not use this, what most likely we need to do is do a server request to the file URL, basically grab the content of the file and execute the content of the file. So you can even, if you are planning to do this, you execute remote code. Basically, if there's a JavaScript file somewhere in the internet that you want to run externally but not store it on your side, we can do this. But this is like the easiest version, right? So let's say run code JavaScript, and right, and let's put in description, and then we know that the JavaScript that we can run is basically ID the entity of 2. So then we can go like this, and there's it's an unexpected 2 points. Oh, wait a second. Code. Why is this not? Oh. Let me. Oh, my bad. So I think the coding. Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, my bad. It's not, well, it's simple, but not that simple. We need to pass. Sorry, we need to pass the parameters as a. As a variable, and then use something like exec, which is a JavaScript function, and then execute our code variable. I think that's the way. Basically, bind it to a variable here, and then execute the code. Let's give it another try. Which one? Oh my bad. I thought I knew those parts. Yes, second. Wasn't it like, which one was it? That's, it's what execute, or Wait a second. JavaScript.
Line terminator, semicolon.
No. It's the part. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did just my bad. It's evolve, not exact. My bad. It's evolve like this, and then you cannot. And the return is empty because there should not be a return on this one. Sorry, I think this doesn't work with a return. If we are going to execute the code basically directly like this, it doesn't need to have a return function. So it's basically something like this, and it's not. Why so? It worked. It worked earlier. So it worked a little bit earlier. So the return, it's evaluating the code, and the code isn't the code what we are executing. Sorry, code should be code, and let's see. So for execution of this, so the code is only 2. Why is it just bringing 2, not 1 plus 2? It should execute this one, right? We don't. What am I doing wrong? I cannot figure it out. Evaluation of the code should be. Oh, I see.
There's a conflict probably with the variables because we inject them automatically as well.
Exactly. So let's see now. Because I'm not outputting. Well, I'm not interested in the. Yeah, but here the code should work, right?
But okay. Input and output probably shouldn't be the same. So let's change it from code to something else for your return.
1 plus 2. Okay. So it's 1 plus 2 now. But why it's not giving us the? Should I do? I should returnable code. Okay, got it. Got it working. Now it's gonna evaluate properly.
You make it look easy.
All right. So now we have the run code JavaScript, and now that we have this, maybe most likely what we need to do is duplicate the workflow that we have. Let's rename it with run code Python. And also the description. Okay. And the code, the inputs, everything should stay the same. But now what we basically need to do is the run PowerShell action to run our Python code, right? So let's do like this. Now for the script itself, we are only interested in they're only interested in the name. So as if you remember from last time, the execution would look something like this. Right. So we have the Python path, the run action from PowerShell, and then we have the folders already set, everything, the path and everything from the file, we have it there. And then this one was basically a parameter, which I'm not interested in, for example, in this particular example, what we are doing. And we are only interested in the name, right? So we can just go and say code name. And for the out, we can go and say out. Like this, and click save. And go to the output. So output, and let's give it a try. I know code 1 was a Python code, and yeah, this worked like a charm from first try. Now, what we can do at this moment, what we can do, if we want, we can add run buttons for each individual code and grab the responses and give it as a response for running our code. So we can go to the listings. And let's go with Well, let's go with the buttons and go to the item buttons and add run JS and add another one, run py, like this. So we have those two buttons. Let's put them earlier in the list of buttons so they pop up first. The first thing that we are planning to do for those run buttons, it will be basically to say we want the type of the extension. So which one will show it by conditionally. So we can go type extension equals to JS, and the other one should be for running Python. So it's going to be with Py, like this. And now let's make them both primary so they stand out in the view, and let's give it a look how they look at this point, like this. Let's give it a try. So we have run Py, run JS, but we didn't link the workflows that we created earlier on those two buttons. So let's also do this. So let's say let's go to the buttons, and for the run JS, let's go and say let's search for JavaScript. So we have run JavaScript code. It only gets the ID of the code that we want to run, and it also gets the return out. So at that point, what we want to do, sorry, we know square bracket. Output variables in front end do not have square brackets, only the input one. And then maybe what we can do is go and go with a detail view, right? Like this. We can make it well inline, let's say, for this particular, and the title will be result. Go with result for the moment. But I think I'm not doing the.
But you need a custom detail.
Yes, I need a custom. Sorry, they are named closely the same. So let's go with the custom detail view. My bad. So let's go with inline. Let's go with result, and the template itself, it should be the return of the JavaScript, and similar to the JavaScript button, let's do for the Python one the same thing. So let's search for Python for execute. Where is it? Run Python code. The code should be the ID one, and the output should be the output. And let's go add the custom detail view. Let's go with inline, result, and let's go with oops, like this. All right. So if I run the Python code, I get 3. If I run the JavaScript, I get also 3. Right, so I get those detailed views basically here under the line when executing. If I choose to choose and do something, I don't know, 3, 1, and update this, I can write the Python again. Sorry, I can. Let me give me a second to refresh. I can run the Python again, and now I'm getting the 5 execution. Now, the idea is that why I'm showing you this is basically running. You can write your own code and have a test. Basically, this is a test option for the two types of codes that we have right now. But in the end, you are left with 2 workflows for running JavaScript and Python codes and getting out the results. So you can integrate this in other workflows. Basically, we can go and say, maybe you have some custom code that you want to execute. So at that point, what we can do is basically say, let's create a new workflow and say, run some code, right? And then we can just link those two workflows like this, and we can say, let's go for the execute JavaScript code, which we know that it's ID2, and we want to grab the return. And let's also run the Python one on the Python code, and we know that the code is 1, and this is an output. Basically, we want to grab the output, and we can end. So in the result, so basically after that, running two codes that we can change directly from the platform, the Python code and the JavaScript code. What we can do is do a basically create a new token, which is going to be the sum of those. So to have those, to get the sum of those two, the easiest way using sum plant and have options, it will be there's a token which is called the map. And basically you can take this token and go back to the configuration workflow and say, all right, so the total will be return plus output, right? So we can just go and say we want return plus output, like this, right? So let's let's take the total and giving it out as a parameter so we can have a look. And let's go with save and test, and let's run this code. And this expression is not the current format. Most likely my output here is missing something. So if I go here, return plus output, so what will be the, so if I output those individually, let's see if there's something wrong with where you're not, it's simplified, somehow I'm messing up the sum expression. So no, that should be it, right? Do math eval expression return plus output. Why not? We're not helping me here.
Yeah. There you got it.
Sorry?
I
No,
thought
no, no. No, maybe it's not. It's return and output. Is it case sensitive? No?
No, I don't think so.
Should not be that one. Why so? What's not? What it doesn't like?
It was asking if recursions is necessary.
No. At least for this one, no. Recursioning is usually needed if a token returns a token, but here they return plain values, right? So nothing to be worried about in this particular situation. So let me see if I can output this directly like this to this problem. No, same thing. How do we? Why? Let's give it another second to see. So evolve. So if we have a 1 plus 1, right? Oh no, it's giving us. Oh, it's giving us because I messed up the square brackets in the output, like this. So this should give us 2, and the return. Maybe they return something that I'm not seeing. If I do return plus 1, this should be 4. Okay, so is the problem from the output then? It's the output which is causing us the problem here.
This does make sense though, to step through one at a time.
Yeah, I think the output does this, but why? What's wrong with the output?
There might be some, yeah, some.
There a character that we do not see and we do not know about. Oh, there it's spaced by. It has 2 spaces additional to left or right on the expression.
Regardless, I mean, so yeah, I mean, we could fix this, but the point is we have the ability to now to run individual scripts through your test window. You can run, and I mean, we're probably not going to use it for a math problem, but we are going to use it for things like last week, extracting information from a PDF, getting an audio file, things like that. So
Exactly. In a real case scenario, maybe it needs to be mentioned that this needs to be expanded a little bit so the items also can retrieve parameters. So including like passing parameters to the JavaScript part, passing parameters to the Python code. But that's something for at least for the JavaScript version of this, I already did an implementation of the kind where you can basically run custom JavaScript on your website that you can edit from a window. There's a small adjustment that you need to do. You need to create an array of parameters that you want to send to that code to execute and add it before the evaluation. And regarding the Python execution, most likely you may need to expand a little bit, specify how many parameters they have, and when executing this, you need to provide a list of those as well. But yeah, it's something
So
like
this would be a great time to encourage if there's any questions. And I'll just add one. I mean, if you wanted to have fun with this, the idea that you're using in the product to write Python, for example, but either code out to disk and then run it, you could write something that was dynamic, right? If you had the ability, if you had sections of logic that you could, it could be programs that write programs that get run, right? If you had a very special use case.
You know, personally, that I personally, whenever there are some things where you need to implement different hashes, different encryptions, different parts of which are might be not available by default in the platform. So if you need to do a SHA-256 or different hash methods, that's a way to create it. Basically, that's a way to make it work. You create a workflow that you can basically edit the workflow here. What's nice here is that you basically, whenever you need, it's letting you have code without connecting to a server, editing to a server, and everything. And you have a workflow already built. So whenever you feel like, hey, I need something that does this, then you can do something like this.
And once an administrator were to set something like this up, they could give access to this code window without necessarily providing full host access to a developer. Right?
Yeah, you can, with the permission grid that Plantana provides, you can even limit exactly what codes, you can go into entities and you can go into the code. And if you set the right permissions, you can just go and say all the users can view all of them, add them, but they can only edit their own, and they cannot delete maybe only their own pieces of code or none of them, so they don't break the website or anything like that. So everyone can start joining and being part of the project without interacting with each other codes, without breaking it from a different perspective. So you can limit from an administrative perspective. You start having a little bit more power of who has access, what has access, without actually giving access to those.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, with no questions from the audience, I'm going to take the share here and just say thank you for attending today. And Radu, thanks for preparing that. I think it was a nice extension of what you did last week. And with that, we'll say happy low coding. Come see us Friday in the low code campfire. See you then.